Fox News, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, CNN, they all told us that without a doubt there were weapons of mass destruction. What happened? Why did that happen? Anyone?
Clearly, they were being lied to. The information that they were being given from the, I think from the administration, was manipulated in such a way to make a march to war seem the direction that this nation should be going in. And I also believe that the president's popularity was high at the time. We were reeling from the 9/11 attack as well, and I think there was just a sympathy toward making some sort of action, undeliberated, an action that just said, let's move forward in some fashion.
You know, interestingly enough, historically, is that Paul O'Neill, a former Commerce Secretary, in his book written with Ron Suskind, said in January of 2001, the first cabinet meeting, the major subject of the meeting was, how can we invade Iraq? January 2001, 8 months before the actual 9/11 happened. But what I think was there was a confluence of interests involved, the neocons, Paul Wolfowitz, etc., and they had their favorite guy, Ahmed Chalabi, who was in London as an exile. Actually, he was a fugitive because he ran a bank in Jordan that he embezzled millions from, and he had to flee the country, but he wanted to get back in Iraq. And as a result, he fed this phony intelligence to the Pentagon, and he had one of his sources was Curveball, who the German intelligence said, first of all, is mentally unstable, is an alcoholic, don't believe him. Didn't stop him. They pumped this intelligence in, and they had a happy, cooperative person in Judith Miller of the New York Times, and it was a circular situation on propaganda. She'd go over to Rumsfeld's office, and Doug Feith, who was the undersecretary, and they'd give her all the stuff. She'd go back to the New York Times, and I'm told she was a very assertive woman and could somehow possibly intimidate editors, and she had the top blockbuster story. There it would run on the New York Times, weapons of mass destruction. President George Bush, questioned by reporters, said, well, look, there it is. Did you see the New York Times this morning? That's it. That proves his weapons of mass destruction. And this went on, and finally, in May of 2004, the ombudsman of the New York Times apologized. His name is Daniel Okert, and he said, that was about 14 months after they first started bombing Baghdad. He said, some of the Times coverage in the months leading up to the invasion of Iraq was credulous. Much of it was inappropriately italicized by lavish front-page display and heavy breathing headlines. And then he admits, and several fine articles that provided perspective or challenged information in the faulty stories were played as quietly as a lullaby. So they were embarrassed about it. And of course, she's no longer with the New York Times.
Well, sure. And this brings me actually to my next question, which is Bob Woodward was the reporter who exposed Watergate. He was instrumental in exposing a corrupt administration. He brought down a president of the United States. He was actually one of the first reporters to know about Valerie Plame, why she was being exposed. He knew that. He sat on this information for 2 years, along with a lot of other information that I guess he felt was more appropriate to put in his book rather than to print in the newspapers where people should have been reading about it. We have that issue. We have Judith Miller's in the middle of the Plame thing. Now they're questioning Tim Russert and his involvement. We have the LA Times caught doctoring war photographs. The number of Iraqi civilians killed is suppressed. We're not allowed to see coffins coming back from Iraq. The public is aware of this. So I think there's a real credibility crisis right now in that people don't believe what they're reading in the newspapers. They don't believe what they're seeing on the evening news. Is anything being done? Is this being discussed in the newsrooms?
Well, you know, Connie, you mentioned the Libby trial, and I think that's been an unraveling that shows something. This administration probably is recognized as one of the most secretive in history. When they first came into office, you know, Cheney had his energy and oil people and refused to release who they were, and it went to the Supreme Court, and it's still never been revealed. But when they want to manipulate, they find a way to cozy up to reporters and call them in, as we found out in the Libby trial with Tim Russert and Judy Miller and the Time magazine reporter, in order to feed them this kind of information in order to, and the American public is noticing this, and it's putting some of the major newspapers, and whether it's NBC or networks, on the defensive, realizing you better learn your lesson, because it's always dangerous to too close to an administration. You can, you know, it can backfire on you.
Absolutely.
I think another issue, though, is the corporate structure of the media. And I think what I have seen is I don't know that the focus is where it should be, which is let's find the truth, good or bad, let's find the truth and put it out there. I think it's a corporation, and the motive is profit. And one of the ways to increase profit is to keep costs down. And as the years go by, the budgets get smaller and smaller, and so I think a lot of the reporters, a lot of the news directors get their promotion based on keeping costs down. And so I think a lot of the reporters aren't giving the tools to go beneath the surface. They've just got to take what's there, put it on the show. It's quick, it's efficient to get the show on the air rather than taking the time. Perhaps if there was less emphasis on profit and more on information and getting the information out. But when you have a corporate structure and the people at the top are trying to squeeze the most out, for that bottom line, things like this are going to go unchecked because it costs more money.
One quick thing to finalize this. The polls show that people don't trust the national media. They end up trusting their local newspaper, their local sources, more than they do the national ones for whatever reason. And maybe it's because they have more reinforcement for those. But the costs in terms of doing investigative reporting are way out there. Take a look at the 2005 series that the Los Angeles Times did on the Martin Luther King hospitals. Excellent series and award-winning series, and it just took a couple of reporters out of the newsroom for 18 months to be able to do that. Those are the kinds of things that I think are in danger as we reduce the costs, the amount of money that we spend on news gathering.
And speaking about cost, is cost now dictating what type of news that we're covering? A few weeks ago, while the East Coast was being decimated by tornadoes, I turned on CNN, big banner headline, "Breaking news, Gavin Newsom apologizes for affair." This was the breaking news, and people are dying in tornadoes, and there were 12 more slaughtered in Iraq. And being in television, Cynthia, of course, you can speak for the entire medium. Why are we wasting airtime on Brangelina and Tomcat? Is it really about the bottom line? Is that it? We now have to be infotainment vehicles?
Unfortunately, that's what I've seen. And it's twofold. One, there's the ratings. And if your ratings are up, again, everyone at the station is going to get promoted, but also you're going to get the sponsors. And so there's the numbers, but also it's the viewers. The viewers, unfortunately, prefer entertainment. And we have the numbers to show it. In addition to the on-air broadcast, we have the website that has the news as well. And we'll put stories, hard news stories on there, and we get our hits, and then put a Britney Spears story up there, and the hits go way up, 4 or 5 times more hits, and it's unfortunate. And that's something we have discussed in the newsroom, and it is a reality. It is a reality, the bottom line and the numbers and the ratings, and that's what people want to see. But where, as a news producer and as a newsroom, it's a fact that you have to deal with, but where you can offset that, I know what we tend to do on some of those stories is the television shows leading up to the newscast. We'll tease them. Coming up, Gavin Newsom, so people want to see it. And then at the beginning of the news show, you give a little piece of it, more coming up later. And then you have that maybe in your C block, which would be after a third set of commercials. And so you still then have the opportunity to do some of these people who don't want to be informed or would rather hear the entertainment, they're going to have to sit through the real news to get to that. And one device is with the teases. You tease that light entertainment story, but put it lower in the broadcast. I mean, you have to announce it at the beginning, but then you have your real news stories. And that's one way where the news media can kind of offset that. Yeah, you're cognizant of the ratings, but you can actually get the information out there through teasing. And it's unfortunate, but it is a reality.
It's really tragic that we have to force feed the public information. I remember, you're not old enough to remember the Vietnam War. I am. And ever burned in my memory are the pictures that came back from Vietnam. that the photojournalists were sending back. And I really think that